Mr. Switkowski, would you, sorry, a bit of a tongue twister. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Chair. Ziggy Switkowski, the Executive Chairman of NBN Co. I would like to update the committee on the status and the direction of the project, including
Mr. Switkowski, how long will this take, roughly, your opening statement?
9 minutes.
Okay, away you go, because we do have 3 hours with you.
Right. Would you like me to take longer?
No, I didn't request that.
So I'd like to update the committee, including the progress of the strategic review. In addition, I would also like to take you through the reasoning for some of the decisions that have been recently taken, such as introducing fresh executive talent and making some of the information on the NBN Co website easier to understand. Of course, the strategic review is not complete, it's still underway, and I've been in the chair for just 6 weeks, so I'm sure you appreciate that there are matters on which I'm not yet in a position to be as expansive as I would like. But over the coming months, NBN Co will continue to be available to the Parliament to answer questions and provide further details on these matters when invited to do so. Can I begin by paying a tribute to the work of my predecessor, Mike Quigley? I appreciate the extraordinary effort that goes into building a company from scratch, especially with the sort of requirements and timelines that characterised NBN Co. Mike laid the foundations for every Australian to be able to receive very fast broadband, and he can be proud of that. Now, having accepted the baton, it is my job now to build on those foundations to achieve the government's objective of a faster, more affordable rollout of the NBN. I believe strongly in the benefits that high-speed broadband can bring to the way we live, work and compete in Australia. And whatever else you might read, I did not come to NBN Co to stop the rollout or to slow it down. I came to NBN Co to accelerate the building of a modern communications network so people are able to enjoy the benefits of the NBN more rapidly. To achieve this objective means reviewing the state of the rollout and examining the role that a broader mix of technologies could play. And we are currently a bit over halfway through a strategic review that will provide us with this clear-eyed view of what options we have in front of us. The review will form the basis of our next corporate plan, and on its completion, our stakeholders, and most particularly NBN company staff, will understand the assumptions and the milestones of the future rollout and the key measures of success. In the meantime, the rollout continues. Minister Turnbull and I recently went to Blacktown to see the rollout firsthand, and the construction team there were continuing to splice fibre in the streets just as before, and they'll continue to work on the network as usual while we repoint the company. I mean, the NBN is at the heart of a very large supply chain, and it's helping to drive employment and economic activity across Australia's cities, regions and country towns. The many component companies within the supply chain need confidence so that they can build and mobilise their resources and plan for sustained future work. And with projects of this size, you cannot easily regain that momentum if it slows too dramatically. For me, the priority right now is not how many premises are passed or how many FSAMs are published on a map. The priority is restoring balance to and confidence in the entire supply chain, from design through construction to activation of services right across the nation. We are working closely with the government to make sure this is front and centre of our efforts as the company works through the strategic review. But let's not be under any illusions. Whatever technology we decide to embrace, rolling out a national broadband network is a complex task. To that end, it's essential that I get the right team in place, or at least make a start on that, even ahead of the appointment of a full-time CEO. And I make no apology for acting quickly to do so. An executive team is being built with skills and experience required for this stage of a critical national infrastructure project. There has been some commentary around the close associations the new personnel have with Telstra, but really this should not be surprising. Telstra is the largest telecommunications organisation in our market, one of the few organisations in Australia that produce the range of skills that building this network requires. And for a project of this complexity, it's essential that we have experts in their fields who have deep experience working for organisations that are leaders in the telecommunications industry, both here and internationally. And this, frankly, is even more the case for the senior executive team, and I'm confident that we are assembling the right mix of skills, industry experience and corporate knowledge to get the job done. The recent appointment to the NBN company board of another 3 highly competent directors puts us in a strong position to manage the new strategic direction and also to oversee governance of NBN Co. And I look forward to working with my colleagues closely. As well as new personnel, we've also brought greater clarity to the information that's publicly available about the state of the rollout, in particular the maps on the NBN Co website. Yep, the maps may not be as colourful as they once were, but they are simpler and they do not create expectations that, as history has shown, NBN Co and the industry struggle to meet. And my team around me and I are happy to talk further about these changes today. It is important to remember that no option has been taken off the table for NBN. In fact, NBN has been given more flexibility to apply best fit technology to the network. And you may have seen that we've issued expressions of interest for retail service providers to participate in a pilot to learn how to optimise and scale the deployment of alternative advanced broadband technologies. Yep, there is a lot happening now, and the next 6 to 12 months will see obviously more activity. We must learn from the past and set clear and reasonable expectations for the coming year. Now, so what will success for NBN Co look like for the year ahead or after another year? As I've said, rather than making promises to pass as many houses as possible with an operational model that has clearly struggled, my priority is to fix the model itself. So given today's starting point, next year will be about sustainable quality growth in the network in conjunction with our industry partners. Success to me will be an operational model that is working consistently and predictably at each stage of the network build. It will be a model that gives certainty to all stakeholders based on a rational and considered corporate plan. How will we know when it's working? Well, construction partners will have confidence in the flow of work. Our retail telco partners will have confidence that the network will be rolled out when we said it would be, where we said it would be, and in the volume we said it would be. Consumers who have been told that NBN will be available on a certain date will have the NBN available on that date. Now, these measures may not grab the headlines that heroic forecasts sometimes do, but without an operational model that delivers these outcomes, NBN Co and the industry will continue to struggle to manage the expansion of the rollout. But I'm confident that we are building the leadership team, the structure, the sense of purpose and the talent at NBN Co to realise this important national goal. I now welcome questions from the members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Switkowski. And could I say that at 4:10 I have to keep an engagement for some 50 minutes. It's long-standing weeks planning, and I'll hand it to Deputy Chair Senator Urquhart. So I'll kick off questions from Senator... Sorry, Chair. Sorry? Are the witnesses comfortable about the photographer being in the room?
No.
You're not comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable. I'm not uncomfortable.
Oh, that's... Pleased to hear that. Senator Lundy, you have the call.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to start with some questions about the draft corporate plan that NBN Co submitted to the government in June of this year. Can you tell the committee who prepared this plan and what the approval process before it was submitted to the government was?
Senator Lundy, thank you for the question. Given that the question relates to a period before I joined the company, I might turn to the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you.
Robin Payne.
Certainly. Robin Payne, Chief Financial Officer, NBN Co. The corporate plan, every time we prepare one, goes through a fairly extensive, as you can imagine, process internally. Ultimately, the plan is approved by the board for submission to the shareholder ministers.
Okay. So both the executive team and the board signed off on that corporate plan before it was submitted.
The board is the body that formally submits it, so the board signs off on it.
Of course.
And
yeah. What did the corporate plan say the capital expenditure for the project would be, and at what date did it say it would be completed?
From memory, $37.4 billion by the end of June 2021.
And what was the equivalent data for the 2012 to 15 plan?
The metrics were the same.
Okay,
They hadn't
so
changed.
there was consistency across both.
Correct.
Thank you. The 2012 to 15 corporate plan included a contingency of $3.7 billion. Was that contingency included in the 2013 to 16 plan also $3.7 billion?
I believe it was, yes.
Had any contingency been used in financial year 2012-13?
No.
So as a percentage of forward capital expenditure, the contingency has increased. Is that correct?
Very marginally, yes.
Very marginally, but it has increased.
Yes.
Thank you. Has there been a further corporate plan developed, or is this the plan to which you are currently operating?
Well, the plan to which we're currently operating is actually the June 2012-15 corporate plan. That's the last one that was formally endorsed by the shareholder ministers. We did prepare a subsequent corporate plan in September, but that was in draft form also.
So, Mr Payne, you're saying that the plan from 2012 is a plan as per the previous government?
Sorry, say again.
You're saying the plan you're working on was as per the previous government?
Correct. That's the
Right,
last
good.
corporate
Just want to
plan that's
clarify
been
that,
endorsed.
So can I just ask the government, now the minister, whether it's the government's intention to publish the corporate plan that NBN Co is currently working to?
I'll take that on notice, Senator Lundy.
Do you think it would be in the interests of transparency for you to do so, given that's a concern that the government has expressed?
Look, Senator Lundy, I just don't want to talk to areas that are outside my direct knowledge as the Minister representing, so I want to give you the most accurate advice possible, so I'll take it on notice.
Thank you. Specifically, I want to know whether there's any plan that varies the cost and revenue assumptions currently being considered that's in that current corporate plan.
Let me have a go at that. The statement of expectations that we've received from the government guides us to continue working as we have been working prior to the change of government, and prior to any revision to the plan that the strategic review may drive.
Okay.
So we are, it's business as usual, with a lot of focus on the strategic review, which is partway complete, and the expectation that that might give us the basis for reconsidering milestones and budgets.
Sure. But just to clarify, the board has not made any changes to the current corporate plan that NBN Co is working to, either in costs or rollout parameters. That remains the same.
The current board has not considered that. That's true.
Okay.
Nothing's changed.
Okay. So I get, again, my question to the Minister, and I understand if you take it on notice, Senator Fifield.
Sure.
That there's obviously a very important reason why this corporate plan should be released. So there is some transparency in the way in which NBN Co is currently operating, particularly with respect to their forecasts and their cost and revenue projections.
Sorry, your question?
So
Senator
my
Lundy?
question is asking you once again that in light of the fact that we know that there have been no changes to the current corporate plan, that it is operating as it was before the change of government, that there is a serious interest in the public domain as to that document being released.
Chair, I've just been provided with some advice in relation to the draft 2013-16 corporate plan, and I'm advised that that has no status, that it wasn't accepted by the previous government, that the Department of Finance thought that the projections were unrealistic, and that the new government's declined to consider the 2013-16 draft corporate plan.
Yes, I think we'd established they were working to the 12 to 15 plan.
That's the last, yes, that's the last.
Yes, so we've already established that, Senator Fifield, that the company's working to the 12 to 15 plan,
Yeah, I
and
just
that's
wanted
the one
to
I'm
provide
asking.
you the information that
that I've been presented with, Chair.
Yeah, but that's the one I'm asking, that if the government's going to release.
Well, I'll, as indicated, I'll take that on notice.
Okay, just going back to that corporate plan, did NBN Co engage any external advisors to review that plan?
The 2012-15 one, we certainly engaged some external advisors to review the model, and I don't believe the 2012-15 one had any other external advisors engaged by the company.
So who, can you remember who that advisor was?
That was Deloitte.
Deloitte? So that was for the 2012-15?
Correct.
And did you engage any advisors for the 2012-16?
For the June draft of the 2013-16 corporate plan, the board engaged Ernst & Young to review some of the key assumptions.
Yeah. I should just clarify something. I'm talking about the 2013 to 15 plan, not 2012 to 15.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, so who assisted you with the second one?
Ernst & Young did a review of some of the key assumptions.
Right. And did that review provide any advice that the actual data did not appear to be aligned with the corporate plan assumptions?
I think overall it said that the experience to date supported the broad assumptions made in the corporate plan.
Right. So the Ernst & Young advisor reviewing the corporate plan for the 2013 to 16 found that all the assumptions were correct.
For the key assumptions they looked at. They didn't look at everything, but for the ones they looked at.
Okay, so what did they look at? Did they look at the capital expenditure parameters?
They looked at some of the, I don't have the report with me, they certainly looked at some of the key capital expenditure areas, some of the revenue assumptions and so on.
And so did that review provide any advice that the actual data did not appear to tally up with the corporate plan assumptions on
No, as I say,
revenue
overall
or capital?
it supported the assumptions. There were a couple of areas where the report, I think, called out that it was very early days and hard to draw too many conclusions from the data to date.
Sure.
But overall it was...
But overall, so you had an external advisor, an independent advisor, advised that the corporate plan, the 2013 to 16, was consistent with the performance of the
key
company.
assumptions, yes.
Yeah, okay. And that was before the report was submitted to the government?
Correct.
Okay, so you got that independent advice that
Correct.
before that report went to government?
Yes.
Okay, so what the government received was not only a corporate plan that the board had approved, but the board had tested that with independent advisors before they received it. Okay. The NBN Co annual report was tabled in October, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Whilst the annual report doesn't compare actual expenditure to budget, can you tell the committee whether there are any costs in the annual report that were in excess of the budget?
No, overall the costs reported for the year ended 30th of June 2013 were below budget.
Were below budget?
Overall, yes.
Okay. Am I correct in saying that the financial statements have been audited by the Australian National Audit Office?
Yes.
Okay. And did the auditor say the accounts were a true and proper record of the financial position and prepared in accordance with accounting standards?
Yes.
Yes. So that means that the actual costs that consultants on the corporate plan compared assumptions to are an actual record of the costs of the company?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is absolutely correct. And just to repeat that those consultants saw no case where the corporate plan assumptions were not aligned with actual data. Isn't that correct?
I believe, I'd have to go back and check, but I believe that is the case.
Yeah. So if someone was to claim that the real cost of the NBN was higher than provided in the corporate plan, they're concluding that either the auditor is wrong or that the board is wrong. Is that a fair comment?
In terms of costs incurred to date, that would be correct.
Yes, thank you. I now want to move on to the strategic review, and I note, Mr Swikowski, that you said in your opening comments, obviously part of that process. How much is NBN Co going to be paying the 3 consultants that I understand have been put in place? Is it Deloitte is one of them, BCG, and there's a third, I think? Quartermenta. They've been engaged already, have they?
They have.
Yes. And how much is that costing NBN Co?
The numbers will be clear once the project is concluded in December and will be disclosed at some stage thereafter, I imagine.
Are you able to give the committee a ballpark figure about what the cost to the company will be?
I'd be very reluctant to do that. I mean, these are commercially sensitive numbers.
I don't want the individual numbers, Mr Swikowski. I'm just looking for whether it's hundreds of thousands, whether it's millions.
Single-digit millions.
Sorry?
Single-digit millions.
Single-digit millions. Okay.
All up.
So somewhere between $1 and $9 million.
Yep.
I'll look forward to narrowing that down at the next estimates hearing.
And I'll be able to give you an exact number.
Was this cost included in any of the NBN Co budgets or foreshadowed in any corporate plans?
Clearly a budget that was set for the 13-14 year did not anticipate this particular expenditure, but there is a provision for the use of consultants.
Yes.
And this amount of money can be accommodated within the budget.
Within that budget?
Yeah.
Okay. How many people inside NBN Co are actively engaged in the review process? I mean, I appreciate the top tier certainly is,
it would be several dozen people.
Okay. Are you able to give me a little more detail about how many people, for example, in full-time equivalent terms, are engaged in the review?
Well, in terms of internal resources, it will be several dozen employees. And then we have the support of 3 external advisory groups who have allocated resources depending upon the particular topics that they're reviewing and consistent with the budget.
Have you been able to cost those internal resources towards the strategic review, and can you tell the committee?
I have not seen any data in terms of estimating the cost of the internal resources, but it's easily done, and it really is a back of the envelope calculation.
Okay, well perhaps if you could take it on notice if there is a notional figure that you've assigned in your operational budget, but it's another one that we'll come back to, no doubt, in the next estimates.
I will.
Are you accounting for costs associated with the strategic review separately for internal accounting purposes?
In terms of out-of-pocket costs, external costs, yes.
And internal costs?
They are easily tracked in terms of resource levels. Whether they will be considered all incremental costs is less clear, because in many cases this is part of a person's job, and that they are coming to the review describing and sharing information that they routinely produce. So it wouldn't be an area where you would say incremental costs were being incurred. In other cases, we are taking people out and putting them on assignment for 4 to 6 weeks to help complete the review. Truthfully, I doubt very much with the sum of the internal costs when the review is completed is going to be a big number.
Okay. Well, if I could foreshadow that we will be looking for that information about the internal allocation of resources and the cost associated with that.
Sure.
Thanks very much. Has the Minister been provided with the draft copy of the review, or a draft copy of the review?
The review is not at that stage. There is no report that I could point to.
Right. So is it the intention of NBN Co to provide the Minister with a draft copy of the review?
There is a process in place where we will brief, where the board is overseeing the progress of the review, and the Minister is will be briefed as to sort of early analyses. And the plan is that in the early days of December, we will have a report that will look like a draft report in its entirety that would be given to the Minister.
I understood that this review is an NBN Co review. Obviously, the government has requested it, but why would a draft copy of the review go to the Minister in advance of NBN Co releasing it publicly?
Well,
I mean, I understand briefing, by all means, but why would a draft copy go? And would it be anticipated that any change could be made to that review by the Minister's office or at the Minister's request?
Well, I'm not anticipating that. Frankly, it just seemed to me like a fairly familiar process from my experiences.
But can you confirm that the Minister or the Minister's office will not be able to modify your report? This is an NBN Co report.
The report that will be put together is an NBN Co report under the sponsorship of the board. And we take ownership for that.
And is it the intention of the board, Mr Swikowski, to subject this review to the sort of independent process that you have with the previous two corporate plans, for example, with Deloitte and Ernst & Young?
No.
So you won't be applying the same rigour as you have with your previous corporate plans?
The rigour comes from the selection of the advisors and the mandate that they have been given. And I think the report, now I'm speaking from a sort of personal judgment and having just returned to these processes after a bit of a gap. I think the report will be judged on its merits when people get access to it. The notion of seeking external validation of budgets and reports sits uncomfortably with me, because I think that we should be very confident to defend what's in our reports and in our budgets, and going outside for others to either test the assumptions or use your assumptions and test your arithmetic seems a redundant step to me.
Can you confirm then that your advisors that are going to be engaged will be providing or contributing to the review, is probably the better way to say, in an independent fashion? So they will be providing, for example, when the review is compiled, an independent view of the data in that review, or will it be just a consolidated document? Sorry, I know this is highly speculative at this stage, but I'm just trying to get a feel for what the review would look like apropos the engagement of the three advisors.
Look, it is a little early to know the exact shape of the ultimate report, but the advisors have been selected for their capability in these areas and for their rigour and ability to think independently. But you know how these things play out. There are a lot of people involved, there's a lot of data that needs to be provided, there's a lot of interpretation of those data, and there's a lot of interaction, as there must be, and vigorous debate around analyses, conclusions and outcomes. That's playing out around us as we speak. So the document at the end will reflect that kind of a process and will be the better for it.
Mr Swikowski, do you know whether or not it's the plan of the Minister to release the report ultimately, or for NBN Co to release the report publicly?
We will provide a report to the government. Thereafter, I can't comment.
So that once you've provided that final, will you provide a draft to the government or a final to the government? A final report to the government?
Could be both. Both steps may occur.
Well, but surely NBN Co has a... responsibility to ensure that what they submit as their corporate plan effectively arising out of the strategic review comes out of the Minister's office the same way that it goes in.
We're certainly confident that whatever comes out of the Minister's office will reflect the contents of the report that we own.
Well, we'll be able to test that on
We will.
questioning, but I suggest you keep a copy of the draft that goes in handy. Can I just take a little break from that, Mr Swikowski, and say to you what a pleasure it is to have you before this Senate committee. I do recall, as some of the other representatives and committee staff, that we tried for many years to have you here, of course, when you were the CEO of Telstra in the late 90s and so forth. So it's with some satisfaction, having served on this committee for many, many years, to see you finally at the table. And I don't mean that in any other way than absolutely genuine. A lot of years have passed.
Well,
And how things change is quite interesting.
I think this is an example of clearly delayed gratification, Senator London.
Yes,
your comments are very gracious, and we do in fact have a lot of shared history.
indeed.
But you will recall in my Telstra days I had a wonderful sidekick in Bill Scales who liked coming to these Senate
I know he did.
committees and did a brilliant job.
Yes, indeed. So I just want to move on now to some of the technology-related issues, some connected with the obviously issues surrounding the strategic review, but others just some fundamental questions to assess where NBN Co is currently at. Has NBN Co at any time prior to the strategic review considered the issues surrounding a fibre to the node network?
Yes.
In that work, have you ever assessed in what percentage of cases the copper network would not be suitable to fibre to the node?
It's a question in front of us. We have most recently started the process of working with Telstra on a pilot approach that will give us more information about fibre to the node on the copper network, how to scale it, and may well reveal whether there are unanticipated issues with the network.
I'll come to that, but you didn't actually answer my question, which is, had you done any assessment prior to the considerations of the strategic review?
Not that I'm aware of.
So NBN Co did not have a figure that said this percentage of the copper network is inaccessible?
No, but I don't know that how one either arrives at that figure or what that figure means. Now here I default back to my own history. The copper network has been working well for decades.
Yeah, with due respect, Dr Swikowski, I will come to that because I would like to explore those very issues with you in just a little bit of depth today, because I remember those conversations we had. But can I ask the Minister how the Coalition came up with the figure of 10% of copper being inaccessible? It was a figure that the Coalition has used. So I want to put that to the Minister, but I also want to put it to NBN Co. Do they have any knowledge about where this 10% figure came from, Minister?
I'll leave it to NBN to speak to their knowledge first.
Okay, I do understand if you want to take it on notice.
Sure, but I thought I'd give officers of the NBN Co the opportunity to speak to their knowledge.
10%, is that a number that has any bearing on any consideration of NBN Co prior to starting your work on the strategic review?
Senator Lundy, I don't understand the metric. What does 10% of copper being inaccessible mean?
10% of copper, well, I don't know. It was the Coalition that said it, so I'm asking you.
I don't.
You don't know either? All right.
I think any of us know what that means at the moment, without going back to the document.
Yes, well, that just confirms what I thought too, is that it was a relativally meaningless figure.
Well, no, I think what it means
Over to you, Minister.
I think what it means is that officers of NBN Co don't know the basis upon which that figure was calculated. I don't think you can draw from it that they have the same conclusion that you do, but I'll take that on
You'll
notice.
take it on notice and source that figure for us, will you? Thank you. So now we can go on to the current issues and the work that NBN Co is doing in this regard. You were starting to tell me about some of the considerations associated with it. My recollection of the state of the copper network, having been described by Telstra executives at this table in the past as being 5 minutes to midnight, and also having explored in depth the status of the copper and the various types of network technology, including pair gain systems, had a significant impact on the function and operation and efficiency of the copper installed in the network. So, given you have as much more knowledge about those things than I do, are you able to reflect further on the state of the copper?
And it's in that spirit of reflection that I'll try to answer the question. The copper network has been in place for a long time. It's constantly being maintained, remediated, upgraded. I recall the one metric that has meaning, well, there are two metrics that has meaning around in determining the quality of the network, include fault rates, how often a household or a customer would call to have a fault attended to that is traced back to flaws in the network, and annual costs of maintenance. And those two figures, not in absolute terms, but in trend terms, give you a sense of the health of the network. Now, clearly I don't have recent Telstra information other than anecdotal material. And my feeling is that the network in 2013, the copper network fault rate may be higher than it was in the time that I was at Telstra, but perhaps not materially higher, and hard to disengage from considerations of weather patterns, for example. So fault rates in the early part of the last decade were lower because the climate was drier. When it gets wetter, that exposes the copper to some extent. And in terms of maintenance costs, I simply don't know what that number is at Telstra because I haven't seen it. Having said that, as best as I can tell, that the copper network continues to perform robustly, and without knowing the number, Telstra must have millions of broadband customers using ADSL on copper, delivering speeds of, I don't know, up to 10 megabit per second. That suggests to me, and yes, there are pair gain systems in the network and they're an issue, relatively small proportion of the 10 million plus lines. So suggests to me that network is robust still, and the concerns that are expressed about the network may not be the basis for the next generation broadband platform, I think are misinformed.
Well, that's certainly what Telstra are saying in their advocacy at the conference that's been going on for the last couple of days. They're talking up their copper network like never before, given that they're currently in negotiations with NBN Co about accessing it. So I guess we would expect that from Telstra. I must say I didn't expect it from you. One of the issues associated with it is getting good data on the network. This is a perennial issue. There have long been questions about the accuracy and veracity of Telstra's front-of-house database. I'm more interested in their back-of-house database. Is NBN Co aware that whether or not Telstra has a database that can give NBN Co an indication of the status or quality of the copper that's currently in place, and, for example, how many are affected by RIMS or smaller medium-sized pair gain systems in the network?
Look, I think that's going to be an early question that's asked of Telstra once the negotiations around the definitive agreement get underway. Does Telstra have a database that is accurate in all of these areas. It used to be an issue years ago. I suspect it's improved, but I don't know.
Do you see access to such a network as critical to determining cost structure, forming part of your strategic review about the prospects of a fibre to the node network?
I mean, access
I
to
would
that
think
data.
so.
Are you saying access to the data? Or?
The data would
Yeah.
be an essential prerequisite for you being able to do an effective costing of a fibre to the node network, surely.
And to some degree, those kind of discussions are happening between the leaders of the strategic review and Telstra as we speak.
Well, I understand from presentations by Alcatel-Lucent that deployment of VDSL requires every copper pair to be tested. Does that testing, and I understand that testing has to be done at the pillar location and will need to be done before there is a decision to use the copper. Is that your understanding of it? I mean, I know the copper varies enormously in quality and in its configuration. But is NBN Co going to insist on getting a status report on those copper pairs before you commit to a costing around a fibre to the node network?
Greg, do you want to have a go on that? Is that a reasonable question of you?
The current thinking is that there would be testing done, whether it informs the strategic review or whether the strategic review makes some assumptions to then be tested, I think is the word frame it at this point. It's an unknown. But your point about testing the copper pair for VDSL is valid.
Yes. Okay, but you don't know yet whether or not, what the algorithm will be for testing the network per se, for the purposes of assessing costs for the strategic review.
No, there will be an engineering.
When will you know that? When will you make a decision as a company about how rigorous you're going to be?
Can I take that on notice to come back? I don't have a time frame.
Yeah, look, it's a little rhetorical, I guess.
It's been a week.
But yeah, I guess the main point is I'm seeking assurances from NBN Co that you will apply that rigour to your costings.
Well,
And part of it's because of the variables that I know exist in the network. And last time I looked, there were some 1.5 systems, pair gain, large and small, in the network, or affecting 1.5 million services. I don't know what the current status of that is, but that was what we explored probably 10 or 12 years ago now. I don't know what the current status of it is, but I would think that those things are very pertinent issues in doing any cost analysis.
and if we don't have the data in detail by the time of the drafting of the review, then assumptions will be made and they'll be very transparent, so they can be either challenged or they can be verified. It is the task of one of the advisory groups to do that. They are busily at the moment mapping out the entire network that we can understand, talking to Telstra about getting information. So I think we'll end up doing quite a believable job in that area. But I acknowledge the question.
Thank you. I understand that in April, NBN Co advised the Joint Committee on the NBN that the current costs of building the local network and distribution network falls at between $1,100 and $1,400 per premise. Is that correct?
That number, did you want to pick it up?
Sorry,
Sure,
yep.
Mr. Fine.
That number,
Mr. Payne?
excuse me, at the time we presented that to the Joint Committee was our best estimate at that time of the cost of completing the areas that we were currently, or at that time, building in. So that was our best estimate at that point in time.
Okay, and has it changed since that point in time?
We've since that point in time we've done a number of things. We've obviously started in more areas and we've had some contract renegotiations, so that looking today at our estimate of completion on premises we're doing now, it would be a bit higher than that.
A bit higher?
A bit higher.
How much is a bit higher?
I think it's between about 1,450 and 1,500.
14
So
and
just above,
1,500?
yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, all right, $1,400 and $1,500 now, more likely. And just so we can understand, on that question, with that higher cost, have you assessed what the full impact on the project will be if those higher costs are sustained?
Well, that's something obviously the strategic review will be looking at as part of its remit.
Okay. Just going back to the copper network for a moment, can you explain the difference between the use of a copper pair for voice and a copper pair for data? This is potentially a very long answer, but it's important because people assume at the moment if they have a voice service that they will receive some kind of data service. We all know at this table that that's not true. It doesn't necessarily go one with the other. So can you just step through the sorts of kilobits and megabits that are available on different types of copper and the challenges of turning potentially a voice copper pair service, i.e. dial tone, into a data service?
It's probably left to a CTO, of which I'm not, to run through that in detail. So,
But is the implication that a copper connection to the home that delivers voice is inherently limited in the data, the bandwidth that it can deliver?
Well, I think the issue we have is that in the promotion of fibre to the node and the discussion about copper, I've certainly had feedback from my constituents. Well, I've got copper, so that means I can get fibre to the node. That doesn't necessarily, that's not necessarily the case because of the variables within the copper network. So, for example, you can get a voice quality service with 2.4 kilobits of capacity, but you can't get your, 1 megabit of data on that same copper pair because of the network configuration. Right. So what I'm trying to do today is just to get some clarity from NBN Co so people don't assume that they will be able to get a broadband service just because they have a copper pair coming into their house.
So, Senator, I think a very large majority of people can make that assumption, but not 100%, because of there will be issues specific to their particular line. I don't think that percentage is very great, but I don't know what it is. So it's a personal view. So here's the way the speed hierarchy unfolds in my mind. We know DSL is available to most households with a copper connection, and that it performs well. So that gets you several megabit per second broadband connections. We know that speeds that you receive at the household are to some extent limited by the distance that you're away from the pillar. It turns out in Australia that is both a challenge, but also we're well positioned in that. My recollection is that about 90% of Australian households are within 600 metres of a pillar. So that permits us to move into the next generation of copper technology, VDSL. That kicks you up into the sort of 25 megabit per second range, which again should be available to most households, but subject to the condition of the copper, perhaps not all. And then there are other standards for copper that are promising speeds much higher than that. And again, providing you aren't too distant from the node, you can get 80 megabit per second download and a quarter of that uploads. And they seem to be generally present around the world, and there's no reason to believe that in Australia we won't be able to get to that point. But if your line of inquiry is, can that be assured for everybody? The answer is no. Do we know which particular areas may be affected? That's work that's to be done. It is work that has to be done. And it's work that there'll be a certain degree in the rollout of a fibre to the node network of remediation that's required, and that'll be part of a discussion that we will have to have with Telstra.
Yes, it goes back to getting good data from Telstra, doesn't it? My recollection of the state of the copper network included, albeit, as you say, some 90% are eligible or technically able to receive ADSL. The reality in the copper network is that that is not the case because of the way in which the stacks are delivered in the exchanges themselves. The DSLAMs, whether it's in a remote integrated multiplexer or an exchange itself, provides for a very limited percentage of distribution, even though on Telstra's calculations, they count the number of services emanating from an exchange that is ADSL enabled, but they don't actually count the number of services that are physically able to receive ADSL. For example, a remote integrated multiplexer or a mini exchange may only be configured to carry ADSL to 40% of the customers emanating from that box. I trust that NBN Co will be mindful of all of Telstra's tricks in how they present to the market and the availability of ADSL, having traversed this at some length in the past when everyone was trying to get ADSL. It is the same bear pit that Australians will be finding themselves in as NBN Co sets about establishing the path that this government has set you on with a fibre to the node network, relying on the very same copper that we know is amply challenged already, even in delivering ADSL, let alone, as you say, the higher level VDSL style services, which I presume would be an even lesser percentage of the style of services that we're talking about now.
As Senator Lundy, as you must appreciate, we do have benchmarks. We can see what's happening in other markets with copper networks, and you can kind of pivot around their reported fault rates and their maintenance levels and make relations and draw inferences about the Australian environment. So I think I acknowledge the accuracy of your comments, although I'm not sure I'd characterise Telstra as being on the dark side, as you might think. I still remember back to my days where I don't think we were accused of being like that, but I don't think we really intended to be. And I expect that our...
Sorry.
Can I just stop you there for a moment? I just want to ask a question. While I was about 4:25, did Minister Turnbull's advisor, Steve Ellis, pass a note to an officer from NBN Co at the table? And if so, could that note be tabled, please?
Is this the note that you passed to me?
Didn't you give it back to him?
Sorry? Yeah, it was this one here.
Chair, I think officers at the table have all sorts of material at their disposal.
I understand that, Senator Fifield, but I'm asking, that was from Minister Turnbull's advisor, as I understand, and so I've asked the question.
I think that's a question we can take on notice.
Well, I'm asking, can you table that?
Well, I'm saying we'll take that on notice. No? We can take that on notice.
So you'll take it on notice whether you'll table the note?
Well, I haven't seen it, but we'll take it on notice. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Lundy.
Very astute observation, Chair, Acting Chair.
Well, I think someone passed the chair a note.
The issue just on the copper, and there are several reports of this and other committees in Parliament about the state of the copper network, and although they constitute historical documents at this juncture, no doubt they still bring some bearing on the state of the network and may be useful. I understand that Telstra is currently investigating about one case per week of high-frequency interference with copper that makes ADSL unusable. Does NBN Co have any information about this problem within the network? And can you explain what this issue is and why it affects data but not voice services?
One case per week,
Yes, like
50
responding
a
to
year
complaints.
out of 10 plus million lines. We have more problems, Telstra has more problems with wombats chewing through its cables than that.
Yeah.
I mean,
but are you aware of this problem?
No.
We don't have a CTO at the table. Do you have a CTO here?
No.
Okay. Perhaps you could take that on notice. It's specific
I don't
because
understand.
the point being, if the higher data services are being affected by attenuation or high frequency interference in the copper bundle, then it's reasonable to assume that as the data load increases, that interference might increase. So even though you can test for current data loads using ADSL without interference, that might become worse in the future. So it's really, again, assessing the status of the network and its suitability for a VDSL or fibre to the node network capability.
I mean, the reason why I kind of hesitated is that the earlier inquiry has to be, is this a systemic issue?
Yes. And does it affect the network negatively as VDSL increases, not
but
decreases?
So that's why one case a week, that's noise, literally,
Sure.
and metaphorically.
Except if you're that person who can't get the data and Telstra say, we can't fix it. Then it's an issue. That's an issue for us because they come and knock on our door and say, Telstra won't fix my problem. In fact, they don't acknowledge my problem exists. And if it's just noise to Telstra, then what's it going to be to NBN Co?
There's a hierarchy of issues around every network and every service, which has greater consequence, unless this is a systemic issue, and I've not heard of it. And it's not yet a systemic issue.
Okay. But you are familiar with the issue of high-frequency interference?
I'm familiar with the physics of high
Yeah.
frequency interference.
Yeah, yeah. The other aspect of the copper network, I do want to just go back to regional distribution of pair gain systems. My previous work showed very clearly that in that optimisation of the Telstra network and the configuring of exchanges, originally to be digital and all the rest of it, and be able to be fitted out with DSLAMs to provide ADSL style services, that it was often the regions who had the least suitable copper for the delivery of ADSL because of the long tails out of town, the long stretches of copper. Has NBN Co done any preliminary analysis of the impact of the fibre to the node model on regional areas, particularly regional towns that do have those long tails out of town servicing the semi-rural areas that often extend for, tens, hundreds of kilometres around regional centres?
Right. That kind of analysis is underway, but I'm reminded of an early instruction of the Minister that areas that were poorly serviced with internet connectivity had poorly functioning copper connections or pair gain systems should get early attention from NBN Co and should be candidates to go with fibre to the premises if that's the preferred technology. So we're not prevented from taking fibre all the way through, if that makes sense. And I think the outcome of the strategic review will reaffirm that we should consider whatever technology brings the capability to connect at high speed quickly and economically to all households, and we will particularly orient our thinking to those that are poorly served, including those with pair gain systems.
Good. So the advice to people who want fibre to the home is move just a little bit out of town.
Senator Lundy, if I can just interrupt you, you've got about time for about one more question.
Oh, okay.
And then we go to Senator Ruston.
Okay, I've got a few more still.
We may have time to come back depending on other
Okay,
speakers.
thank you. I mean, if I could place on notice the question about the interference
Yes.
on that, if you could come back to me about that, and other areas relating to the limitations of pair gain systems within the Telstra network that have formed part of your analysis of the network to date, and the ADSL and VDSL inhibiting effects of pair gain systems generally. Does the analysis you've done so far indicate that the government's promise of 25 megabits per second by 2016 for everyone is achievable? And have you done any indicative work as to how many cabinets, for example, would need to be installed, or nodes would need to be installed to deliver on that promise?
That is a key piece of work that the review is currently undertaking, and it will constitute part of the review.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator Lundy. Senator Ruston.
I've got more, but I'll come to you shortly. Come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go into my questioning, I didn't interrupt Senator Lundy, otherwise so I just wondered if I could just ask you a few follow-up questions in relation to, so I apologise for going back over old ground. In relation to the two corporate plans that you were discussing at the very beginning of the conversation, I noticed that it was said that the previous government hadn't accepted the 2013-16 corporate plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, how many times didn't it accept it? Was it just the once, or did it go a number of times, or what?
I think the board approved it for lodgement in June, so it would have gone in at the end of June to the shareholder ministers. At around that time, you may recall there were some issues with, particularly around remediation ceasing, and so I think the company wrote to the shareholder ministers to say that the short-term targets may need to be revised because there was expected to be a prolonged cessation in remediation. So the shareholder ministers asked us to resubmit the plan with that taken into account, and that's hence why the second version in September.
So it was only resubmitted once?
Correct.
Yep. And so was it ever submitted in a draft form prior to being submitted in a cabinet form?
The cabinet form is a draft form, so it's in draft until cabinet accepts it.
Okay. And it was the issue of remediation that was the reason why it was rejected, and the only reason it was rejected, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, we were asked to revise it to take into account the revised rollout projections that were largely due to remediation, but also other issues around the rollout at the time and renegotiations with some of the contractors.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Can I move on then to consultants? There seemed to be some discrepancy about consultants. Prior to the election, so say in the 2012-13 year, how many external consultants were actually under contract to the NBN Code during that time?
I'd have to take that on notice. I don't know the exact number.
Well, if you're going to do that, maybe you could give me the total cost of
Sure.
that as well. Would you have any idea of how many staff were employed by NBN Co prior to the election?
I think at the end of June it was 2,900.
2,860 approximately.
2,860. So does this reflect the 2012-15 corporate plan employment numbers?
I think it's consistent. I think it might be a little bit under.
Under?
A little bit
So,
under.
so the 2012-15 plan had projected there would be more than 2,860 employees?
I believe so, a little bit more.
Okay. Do you want to confirm that
I
back
will.
with me? Okay. Okay, so in terms of the consultant, back to the consultants and staff costs, so sort of the non-digging the trench costs that are incurred by the company, in any period of time that you reported, were the costs of consultants and staff, etc., so that non-operational component of the budget, was it the costs ever, were they always below, always above, some below, some above? I mean, was there any time when the costings were actually below budget?
And the costings were below budget.
Well, actually, the expenditure was below budget, sorry.
Yes, as I said earlier, the expenditure overall for 2013, operating expenditure was under budget.
Okay. So could you explain, is there any particular reason why in the tabling of the I'm assuming it was the 2012 report that was tabled in October? Or was it 2013 report tabled in October? The one that's just been tabled?
That's the 2013.
Okay. So was there a reason why, is there any explanation as to why the expenditure was below budget?
I think the main reason is that because the rollout is delayed, so within the operating expenditure we have things like migration payments and so on to Telstra and Optus, and as we don't have the footprint, we haven't made
So those costs were probably reflective of the fact that the rollout was well behind what was expected to be at the time, so it wasn't any great cost-saving measures that occurred because of your massive efficiency or anything. Okay, thank you. Can I just move to, and indulge me, I'm from South Australia, so I'd be really keen to maybe ask you some questions, particularly about South Australia. Last week there was an issue in relation to these maps, and we had a situation where there was quite a lot of distress created in the local community about the fact that people were led to believe by a number of members of Parliament that people had been taken off the NBN and that they previously were about to be connected, and all of a sudden somebody came in and just went whack and had taken them off. My understanding was that it was merely a change in the interpretation of what under construction meant, and that there was in no way anybody who was going to be removed from the NBN. They were just being told in perhaps more user-friendly language what under construction meant. Would you like to comment on that, Dr. Sikowski?
I'll make a couple of comments and look around to my colleagues to add theirs. So the incoming government had promised to provide data around the NBN rollout in a timely fashion that was transparent and meaningful. And this has particular relevance to the way in which information was presented around the state of the rollout and the forecast availability of access to households and businesses. The chain of the whole construction process starts from the design through to kind of the build phase, which may include remediation, through to the service being available and customer being activated. The previous measures, along with the colour-coded maps, started at the beginning of the process, where a design was initiated and some degree of inspection in the field was undertaken. And associated with that was the expectation that within a reasonable period of time, a person in that colour-coded area or a household would have access to high-speed internet. In reality, as the build program ran into various challenges and the outlook was revised down, those implied promises were being missed regularly, and they're not actually quite very meaningful at that point. The more meaningful statistic is when the build starts and you can see in your street people working on pits or drawing cable, etc. So we have decided to report from that point, build having commenced, and also areas where services are available to be activated. It is our view that these are more helpful figures, without denying that you could measure the whole network rollout differently. But I think these are more relevant. Now that's just a way of representing data. Nothing changed. people who were in zones where planning had begun were still in zones where planning had begun. There was no internal view that we were going to reprioritise the rollout or anything like that. We may yet do that as a result of the strategic review and its recommendations and acceptance by the government, but we're nowhere near that point. So the only thing that changed was the way in which we were reporting the rollout. And it is true that large sections of geography were no longer colour-coded. But prior to that, the colour coding had, I think, progressively lost relevance. Anybody else? Yeah,
So what was driving us was to simplify and clarify out to communities who were reading online when we were due to begin, but more importantly, when they were expecting it in their street. So that was what drove the decision to do that, and behind that, of course, was two factors, particularly in South Australia. So you'd already had delays due to Cynthia's performance, and we'd communicated that to people, and that had resulted in some of the premises that are on the maps moving to the right in terms of timing. They hadn't disappeared, but they were delayed in terms of when construction was actually going to commence. And then, of course, there was a second issue in terms of remediation and Telstra with asbestos that further delayed some of those decisions. So when you took those two factors that were delay factors into account with simplifying and clarifying when you can expect NBN to actually commence and conclude construction, that's all that we've communicated in the maps. There is no decision made to not commence construction to those places yet. That's a decision that remains ahead for us as to when people can expect to see us in the street building and, more importantly, completing.
So I suppose you'd have to say it was misleading, if not mischievous, for, well, just as an example, Kate Ellis, the member for Adelaide, which is a place that I spend quite a lot of time, said on local radio, and she was complaining that Olive Street in Prospect had been taken off the rollout map by the new government. So, you know, that it's misleading to be suggesting, and for any member to have been suggesting in the previous weeks that changing these maps was actually removing people from the NBN path. Is that correct?
that's an incorrect statement. That's right.
Okay, thank you. So I suppose, can I now get down to the actual NBN rollout in South Australia and how it has been progressing? In September, well, prior to September, NBN Co reported that 95,900 premises were under construction. Could you give me an idea of how many premises in South Australia are under construction by your new terminology, and also how many have actually got access to the NBN as we're sitting here now?
Who wants to take that, Kel? You take that.
Yeah. So at the moment, we have actually commenced construction, and it's in various states, of 16,500 premises in South Australia.
And how many of those have actually got access to the NBN now?
So that's how construction commenced. Premises that are actually passed now that could connect to NBN is 3,860.
And of that 3,860, are all of them able to connect to the NBN despite the fact that the fiber's gone past?
No, there's still a number of those premises that sit in what we call service class 0 that require some further steps to be taken by NBN to enable them to connect.
Can you, while we're on service class 0, could you explain to me how service class 0 has come about if I've got a cable running past my house and I'm not able to get access? What's happened there?
Senator Rossen, typically it'll relate to an apartment building where a solution has not yet been established for connecting the apartment building and the apartment dwellers efficiently to the main line that runs down the street. There's a fair number of those examples. It's still an issue. I think the solution suggests itself in the future about utilising the existing cabling in the building, but prior to the up until this point, the technical model was it was going to be fibre to the apartment, and that's very difficult to execute logistically, and that process has not yet been settled. So mostly service class 0 examples are ones where there are multi-dwelling units. I don't know if we call non-dwelling dwellings, such as traffic lights and ATM machines. Are they in these figures as well?
No, most of those are excluded. There is the second category of what we call complex and commercial premises. So this is a hospital, for example, would be an example of those categories, the second category beyond MDUs.
Okay, can I go back to the service class 0 again then? So what you're saying is that because we had a program that said it had to be fibre to the home in multiple dwelling buildings, because we couldn't actually do the fibre to each individual apartment, we weren't going to give them anything at all?
Well, initially that was put in a category where a technical solution had to be found. I understand in recent months the company was moving in the direction of bringing fibre to the basement and then using the in-building wiring, but it has not happened yet. In fact, one of the trials that we've agreed to undertake in just recent days, together with the industry and Telstra, is to take fibre to the basement and then deploy and then interface to the existing wiring to see how that performs. The technology is partly the issue, but the larger issue is just the logistics of dealing with multi-dwelling units, multi-owner and occupied apartments, absentee owners, and getting that organised. I understand, that's not always a straightforward process.
Okay. Under the revised proposal for the NBN, I mean, do you see that if you're doing fibre to the node, does that completely simplify this problem?
Absolutely. No, it's a very good point. It does, absolutely. Once you're prepared to use existing wiring, that doesn't require you to intrude into people's apartments or whatever. That makes that job much easier, and this whole category should progressively fall away.
Okay. Back to South Australia and the 3,860 premises that have been gone past. How many of those are in the city, and how many of those are outside of the metropolitan area?
I guess we're going to have to take that one on notice. We just don't know.
Do we have anything out of the greater CBD?
Don't know.
I can take it on notice. I'll try and get back to you in this hearing.
I quite understand that you've only been there for a week.
Thank you.
So Haley, it's a bit new across the top of it. In the communications that we've seen of recent times, it's been indicated that the intention is to have the NBN completed by 2016. And particularly within, I speak on behalf of rural and regional South Australians in this regard, will there be a greater ability for more people to be accessed under your rollout model than on the previous rollout model in a more timely fashion, but even in totality, will more premises be accessible?
I mean, I think it's accepted that one key advantage of fibre to the node is that the network can be built and completed more quickly and less intrusively and less expensively than an all-fibre network. So yes, fibre to the node should see us provide access to Australians at the 25 megabit per second level faster than virtually any other fixed network option. I say fixed network because obviously satellite and wireless will be in the mix, and particularly in the regional and remote areas. But it's important to state that the transition, assuming that it's properly planned and is an outcome of the strategic review, the transition to a fibre to the node architecture will take most of next calendar year to execute. So we'll be building fibre to the premises from now into well into next year, and then you could say the starting gun will be fired for fibre to the node at scale, and that'll be quite late next year. So between then and the end of 2016 is a very, very tight timetable.
In terms of the number of people projected to have access to broadband speeds of 25 megabits per second, are more people, particularly in rural, remote and regional areas, will be able to get access to this speed than would have been able to get access to it under the previous model?
Right. Well, a good number of those people that you refer to would have been serviced by satellite and the fixed wireless network, and those plans are not being varied greatly at this stage. So the two alternative pathways have that in common. But people who are going to get direct fibre connections, but instead may be seen to be better suited for fibre to the node, will certainly get access to those sorts of speeds earlier than the alternative, in most cases.
Okay. Is it possible to just get some rollout figures for South Australia from here on in? Is that something you've got available to you?
Well, we have them, not here though.
Oh, okay.
So we'll take it on notice.
Okay. No, just
To date?
Yeah, to date, and what's the projection from here? And I'm sure that Senator Ludlam would probably be very interested to know what Western Australia's rollout figures were as well. Can I just take you to something that was...
Just on that issue, Senator Ruston, Mr Switkowski, are those figures available on the NBN website? Or are they just total figures? I know you have total figures there. Do you have them broken down between each state?
We have total figures. I don't think we break them down by state, and we don't give forecasts.
Okay.
At the moment, our forecasts are fluid as we try to... As you know, we are dealing with, and in particular Greg is, an industry that is not exactly completely settled, and there are issues, and we're trying to resolve those. Our ability to deliver a certain footprint by the end of this financial year will be influenced by how we work with our partners. There's quite a lot of work to be done there to improve relationships, etc. And so the outlook is, at this stage, quite uncertain.
Well, I saw the figures briefly on the website the other day, and there's something like 320,000 premises passed. Correct me if my figures are way out of plumb, but some 70,000 you cannot hook to it under the current technology and
well, that was a line of questioning just before you returned. I think the figure at the moment is 247,000 premises passed.
Yep.
And approximately 70,000+ in a category where you can see the cable run down the street but can't be connected because you are typically in an apartment block where until we change the technology policy was always intended to be connected by fibre and fibre running up and down through your apartment block. That means rewiring the whole apartment block. That means getting the agreement of the owners, scheduling with the multiple tenants, and that, I'm told, was a far from straightforward process.
So those figures were not released in previous estimates, so I thank you for your transparency highlighting that some 70,000 premises were counted as being passed but cannot be connected to.
You do need that kind of additional explanation to understand what the figures mean.
Yeah. Sorry, Senator Ruston.
Oh, no, not at all. And I'm sure you'll probably have a supplementary to this next question I'm about to ask. It was reported that Opticom chief regulator questioned the amount of fibre that had been used in the NBN rollout, and I'm just quoting from I think the NBN is what I would call a supersized network compared to what you can build at a very economic price without compromising either quality or technology, Mr Smith told the conference. It's, to me, crazy that you build a network with so much fibre in it compared with what you can build to achieve the same outcome. The NBN uses ribbon fibre technology, which involves 12 separate fibres, etc., etc., etc. Do you have would you like to make a comment as to the appropriateness of the actual physical cable and fibre that's being rolled out at the moment, as to whether it is the best, most efficient, effective physical product to be delivering what we're trying to deliver?
Again, we will have a more kind of informed comment as the review is concluded. But it is true that when we invite people, or people from other countries come in and observe what we're doing, they find the proposal to have an all-fibre network in a continent of our size to be ambitious, and that the design to be very complete. And so there are opportunities to, even within the fibre blueprint, to do things differently and more economically, without sacrificing quality or without limiting options down the line. Now, to be complete, in the copper world, this is also the case. You'll find as you travel around the world, some telecom carriers have copper cable. This is more than you want to know, by the way, but some copper cables that are 0.6 millimetres, 0.5 millimetres, 0.4 millimetres, that ultimately affects some aspects of performance of the copper cable. But in the fibre world, you come down to fewer fibres. It is definitely translating into lower costs and into a more manageable rollout, because even things as simple as taking fibre around a corner is harder when it's a stiffer cable, even some stuff like that. So it's true. Overseas experts come along and they say, well, we don't quite understand why you've gone the way you've gone.
Just to come here and say, oh my goodness, I wish our government had the vision of your government.
Some say that too.
Yeah, just make sure we get a wide range of views.
Just following on with the supplementary from Senator Ruston, there's a thick green cable being rolled out, correct?
Yes.
Now that cable is not perfectly round, it is shaped on the outside and has, what, 288 fibres in it? Is that
some large number like that? Yes.
Well, I had complaints from people contracting that saying that cable, it's very difficult to put the parachute on it and blow it along the tubes, the Telstra tubes, because it won't hold the air because it's not round. Then they showed me another cable that was smaller and had 320 fibres in it, the same size fibres, which is easier to loop for the joins, which is easy to feed through. It appears to me that the cable being used is probably the most expensive and the most difficult and the least productive. Have you found that?
Look, I just don't know. It is a question in front of us.
Could you just perhaps take that in consideration, because I had people approach me where they had to tool up $15,000 their little business to get the joining equipment for the cable.
Are they selling the other cable, Senator?
We'll disregard the interjection. So they had to tool up $15,000 for their tools, and the cable they find very difficult because it's so thick and less flexible to join it, and couldn't feed it down the tubes. And they were saying to me, why don't you get the thinner cable with more fibres, carry more load, easy to run out and far easier to work with? So perhaps your organisation may look at that sometime in the future. Senator Ruston.
Thank you. Back to SA. I was just reading through some figures I had here, and it said there was only 791 active connections in South Australia prior to the election. Would that be?
700. Well, if the figure at the 9th of September for South Australia was 1,646 premises passed, take a percentage of that, and is 700 consistent with that? It could be.
Yeah. So, so reasonably, in 4 years, that's not exactly the most mind-blowing achievement. I understand that there's only been 3 connections in the Northern Territory, so I should imagine that my colleagues in the Northern Territory should be somewhat even more unhappy about the rollout. So, how much longer have I got, sir?
You're nearly out of time, Senator Ruston. So
Okay.
I've been reminded from the Deputy Chair, who's been chairing in my absence.
Yep. Okay. Just quickly, strategic review, timeframe on completion?
Well, we were given a non-negotiable timeframe of the first week of December, so we're close.
Yep.
And we're going to meet that timetable.
Okay. In the strategic review, are you taking into account any prioritisation of making sure that those that are the rollout actually addresses those that have got the worst services now? Or, I mean, is that part of the review to try and determine so that we get some sort of level of equity back as quickly as possible?
The review at the moment is mapping out the whole geography of Australia and working out a coherent rollout program. Now, maybe I can take advantage of your question to say the following, and that is, if you had started a rollout again, you would roll it out so that you could achieve a critical mass of houses passed in any one area that would motivate the retail service providers to market in that area. The current rollout has elements of that, but it has large elements of simply being present somewhere in subcritical numbers, and that's costly. It's very inefficient, and it really is no way to do it. So, one outcome from the review will be a proposed rollout program, and maybe clear principles about how that rollout should be executed and how decisions should be taken along the way. Now, an early consideration in all of that, one of the principles will be we want to get to people who don't have adequate internet connectivity fastest. We want to get to people who are suffering from poor service and replace it, as well as doing the kind of efficient and productive rollout that I think is still ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, Mr Payne, if you could table back to the committee at some stage what the total expenditure on consultants was for the NBN Co up until the end of August.
I will do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Senator Ludlam.
Welcome to your first estimates, Dr Switkowski.
Nice to see you in the flesh, Senator Ludlam.
Yeah, indeed. And thanks for the answers that you've provided so far. This has been quite helpful. I want to just track through what you consider to be some of your objectives. If you feel I'm getting political, by all means, direct me to the Minister. But I'm trying to get a sense, I think in your brief opening statement, which I watched on the monitors, you said something along the lines of all options are on the table as far as your reviews are concerned. I'm just trying to tease out what that actually means. If the result of your reviews comes back that actually a wholesale open access fibre to the premises network is the most economic option, are you honestly of the view that you'd be free to pursue that course of action?
Well, I'd certainly be in a position where I'd have to prosecute that case pretty energetically. That kind of conclusion would run against the evidence everywhere else, but we'll wait to see what the analysis produces.
I could contest that statement at length, but I'm not sure that it's worth it. But you would be open to, I guess the distinction I'm trying to draw out here is that the coalition government took a fairly, a reasonably well-defined policy to the last election. Unlike a lot of other portfolio areas, you knew what Mr Turnbull was going to propose. For you to then come out and say you've got complete flexibility as to the model the company pursues seems a bit at odds with government policy, I would have thought.
Look, it is my role to interpret government policy, but my recollection is that when in opposition, the Minister made the point that there would be a review and that the review would inform decisions around the technology choices and the nature of the rollout.
All right.
So, I take that as my writing instructions.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that pans out. Is it your understanding, though, that you're still building, or you're still building a wholesale-only network? Yes. There's no proposition here that NBN would become vertically integrated in any way?
None.
Okay. Do you believe that it's your job to deliver a uniform national wholesale price? No matter where you are in the country for various service
subject
categories.
to being reminded of something I'm not aware of, the answer is yes.
All You can correct the record later if you're not comfortable with what you've.
But uniform as in, the reason I hesitate is it uniform as in quality of service, uniform as in pricing?
I asked about price. Quality of service, you're a bit limited. I'm presuming no matter what technology choices you end up with, you're still going to have a kind of graduated response depending on how far you are from a capital city. The model that the previous government pursued that said across the categories of speed and service quality at the lower end of the spectrum, the price would be the same no matter where you were in the country. Is it your expectation or your understanding that it's your job to still deliver that, albeit with a different technology mix?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your understanding that the NBN Co will retain the natural monopoly aspects that this Parliament debated ad nauseum for a period of about 2 years, or are we going to see a period of infrastructure competition at the wholesale level?
Look, I consider that a policy question. That is a reasonable question to ask.
Thank you.
But I've been given no instructions other than your introductory comments.
So that one's you've been pretty clear on the first two. On the third one, it's maybe, not sure.
It's not that it's unsure today, but I think it's a reasonable question that will be asked and debated.
Okay.
But it is a policy question for the government, really.
Senator Fifield, do you want to take that one?
I'll take that on notice for Minister Turnbull.
Thank you. Is it, and again, I'm honestly not certain whether to direct these to you, Dr. Switkowski, or to the Minister. Is it your understanding that Telstra is to remain structurally separated under whatever avenues, technology avenues you choose to pursue with NBN Co?
Well, that I think is for the Minister.
Senator Fifield.
Sorry, Senator Ludlam, I was just talking to one of the officers, but some of the questions that you're asking are ones which are probably better able to be addressed later this evening when the department's at the table, because policy issues, I guess, are usually channelled through that part of the program. But anyway, just reminding you that that opportunity is there later tonight.
I suspect if I put it to them, and I may not be around that late, I might be elsewhere, you'd ask me to take it on notice. So could I maybe just shortcut that process and put that to you now?
Sorry, just
whether
was
it's
talking to me while you were
anticipated
asking that question.
So when Mr Turnbull took over from Senator Minchin as communications shadow spokes a couple of years back, Mr Turnbull changed Coalition's policy quite sharply that Telstra should be structurally separated, wholesale and retail arms separated out. I'm keen to know whether that is still government policy or not.
As I say, I think it's better to address that later in the evening.
Thank you. I may not be here, Senator Fifield. Can you take that one on notice? Thank you. Is it still anticipated that TUSMA would retain its independent status as the delivery mechanism for the USO in this brave new world that we're entering?
Yeah, it's
Another one?
outside my area of knowledge, Senator Ludlam, as the Minister representing the Minister.
Okay. I'm interested to know, I guess, if you can point me to a document that already exists in the public domain. What's this current government's policy on the universal service obligation? That's for on notice.
Yeah, we'll take that on notice or later tonight.
Thank you. When the expert panel, go ahead.
Not being difficult, but some of these questions, officers from the Department of Communications itself would be in a position to assist with.
All right, great, thanks. When the expert panel was reviewing the first iteration of the NBN, now going back quite a number of years, the panel came back with the finding that a fibre to the node network would be effectively obsolete on the day it was built, and that you would need to eventually, or potentially quite reasonably soon, need to overbuild the nodes and go all the way to the premises. You'd be ripping the nodes themselves and the pillars out. What's your understanding of the upgrade path for a fibre to the node network once it's built? How much of that network architecture is reusable in a fibre to the premises world?
Well, again, that's a fair question. That is in front of the review at the moment. We'll see what recommendations they make when the drafts begin to be written.
That's not really a review question, it's a basic technology question. I mean, irrespective of what the review finds, what is your understanding of the upgradability of a fibre to the node network if you want to go all the way to the door?
I think before that question, you'd have to, I think, contemplate what is the outlook for a fibre to the node architecture, and at which point and for what reason would an upgrade be advised. And so there you get back into the discussion we had with Senator Lundy about what is the outlook for an FTTN network, and can it for a considerable time satisfy the needs of Australian users. And the upgrade path for a fibre to the node network takes you through the 10 to 25 megabit per second to 80, and then if you want to go to GFast, hundreds of megabits per second in the years ahead. So maybe I would rephrase the question: do you think for the next decade, which is probably as far as one can think reasonably, there will be a situation where a significant upgrade from FTTN to FTTP will be justified and required? There is a good chance the answer to that is no.
Okay. You're going to have to get your skates on to deliver a national fibre to the node network by 2016. You've been in the technology industry a long time. You're familiar with Moore's law and its equivalent for data transfer rates. You're never going to be able to provide a gigabit service on copper, for example, like in no one's book.
I understand why you would say that, but it is interesting that at the moment some copper-based technologies are being demonstrated that are getting very close to gigabit per second. I agree, it's impressive and is yet to be built out in scale. On the other hand, I'd ask the question: what's significant about a gigabit per second?
The same thing that was significant about upgrading to broadband 10 years ago. The fact that I'm really glad I'm not stuck on a dial-up service, that the government didn't strand me on a network that would only accommodate dial-up speeds. I'm glad that didn't happen. And I fear that that's what we're going to be building over the next 4 or 5 years, is the equivalent of stranding the 70 or 80% of the population of the country on dial-up. So that's the significance I see.
I understand the analogy that you're drawing. I don't think it has as much validity in this decade as it had 2 decades ago. And at the moment, you need to stress a whole lot of assumptions to demonstrate how a normal household would use 100 megabit per second broadband service through the various devices and applications that are normally found in today's and tomorrow's household.
Yeah, but just a moment. If it's 1995 and I'm enjoying my dial-up service and you ask me to anticipate what a household would do with a 25 down, 5 up service, I'm not going to have the faintest idea. Those services haven't been invented in 1995. So anyway,
no, but
I'm labouring the point.
May I take that point, because I think Senator Ludlam raises quite an interesting point about anticipating the future. In 1995, neither you nor I could have picked what was relevant in this industry in 2005. I know that for a fact because I was around at the time. And in 2005 or 2003, we would have missed 2013 by a very, very wide margin. We've got to be very careful about making decisions today that have associated with them enormous costs and enormous execution challenges, because we think that in 10 years' time there are going to be particular applications that will require just that form of delivery. Reasonable people may do that, but you'd better wrap around that a whole lot of ability to be flexible and to change your mind almost annually.
We might have gone a little bit off topic, and this is maybe a conversation that would be better taken offline.
You'll be aware that the network that you're designing needs to allow householders or small businesses, say, who want a fibre service all the way to the premise to be able to order it up. Is that the case?
I've seen reference to the fact that there will be a market for that, and that
user pays.
There will be a provision for NBN Co to provide an all fibre service at a cost.
Yeah, so it's user pays for what was up to the point where there was a change of government would be delivered to every household. That's a shame, isn't it? There's been a bit of speculation in the tech press that you would potentially adopt part of Telstra or all of Telstra or Optus's HFC network as part of your core network. Is that something that you're contemplating?
It'll be a consideration in this review to see the appeal or otherwise of including that in the larger mix of technologies.
Okay, that's part of the review. And are you also going to be designing, or during the course of the review, designing processes for householders who want to pay for the network, since it won't be delivered as of right?
No, that's in the normal course of business. Okay. So those processes will be designed.
Okay. Now, there's been a fair bit of conversation back and forth about the condition of Telstra's copper. So can you provide for us your estimate of the remediation costs, not the OPEX, but the remediation costs of bringing Telstra's network up to the sort of standard that you're going to require?
Look, I could have a stab at it, but frankly, this is now getting into commercially sensitive areas that will
You're spending taxpayers' money, Dr. Switkowski.
I'm very, very alert to that, but it will be part of the discussions that we have with Telstra.
But I could go to the financial press and quote you various estimates of that are floating around there. Just give us a ballpark figure, and we won't hold you to it.
Well, again, I wouldn't do that, and I'm not sure how well informed these estimates could be, but maybe they are.
Well, you could help inform the debate by giving us your estimate.
Senator Ludlam, it's too early in the process of engaging with Telstra for me to be able to even make a judgment, A, about what the numbers are, and B, about the appropriateness of disclosing them.
So there's going to be a remediation cost, which I'm presuming you will book as CapEx, and then there's going to be every single year maintaining that network. If I ask you what your estimated OPEX for maintaining that network in perpetuity would be, you'd give me the same answer, I guess.
Yeah.
You would, okay. So there are Telstra, the piece here that ran in the Australian on Tuesday the 19th, where spokespeople for Telstra are sounding a little bit wounded, saying please stop trashing our copper network. It's actually in decent shape. It doesn't rot. So it's much the same as it's always been and always will be. How old are the oldest parts of Telstra's network?
Oh, several decades.
How many is several?
40 years, 50 years.
Okay. And you're confident that all parts of that network can be brought up to a standard where you could potentially deliver something close to a gigabit service down the track that would be competitive with a fibre to the home?
Now you're verbally me, Senator Ludlam.
Don't ever let me do that.
And I think I said this to Senator Lundy. Will 100% of copper customers get maximum speed? No.
What percentage are you shooting for?
Again, this is a really important question that will be addressed, is being addressed, and hopefully will be resolved by this review.
Okay. Did you advise the Coalition on the NBN policy that it took to the election before the change of government on September 7?
No, I did not.
You did not. When were you first approached by Mr Turnbull or anybody from the Coalition and first canvassed the possibility of you taking up this position?
My recollection of the process was earlier this year, probably around about April. I was one of what I presume was many people that the opposition minister was consulting with around NBN Co, seeking views, etc. Not particularly around taking up a position at that stage.
Seeking views. So in the question I just put to you previously, you said you had never advised the coalition on the policy it took to the election. So what kind of views were being sought, if not policy views?
Oh, one has conversations with politicians about matters all of the time.
Nothing to do with the NBN policy, though?
And Senator Turnbull, not Senator Turnbull, Mr Turnbull and I go back a ways. He has a large range of interests. I had been out. I mean, it would have been presumptuous of me to offer views on NBN policy when I had spent the previous several years at some distance from the telecom industry.
Well, it sounds as though
Sorry,
you were
Chair,
invited
Chair,
to... Yeah, go on.
We're getting close to, well, we're probably beyond that which falls within the responsibility of the NBN Co. I think it's important that questions relate to the agency which is before the committee.
Okay.
Yes, Minister, I agree with you totally, and I was just listening very carefully on how far you're going to go to the edge there, Senator Ludlam. So onto the issues, please,
I appreciate
not the
your generosity,
personalities.
Chair. All right then. So, Dr. Switkowski, when was the matter of your candidature for chairing NBN Co first raised with you?
Senator Ludlam, we're still on the same track.
I mean,
But nothing I'm asking is out of order. Unless there's a particular
Minister,
public
you're at
interest
the call.
immunity
Go
ground.
ahead.
This estimates is to look at the NBN Co. It's to discuss matters to do with the rollout program of the organisation, to do with the budget and finances of the organisation. And I think we're getting beyond those now.
Yeah.
Minister, and with your discretion, Chair, if we go back to estimate sessions past, we will find numerous instances of Senator Birmingham, Senator Betts and others quizzing Mike Quigley about his background in the telco sector, his process of his appointment.
I
don't think I'm
the background
trespassing
is
on...
a very good point you make. Not when did you talk to such and such and did you help with policy and so on. His background of Mr Quigley's in his expert field.
Well, that's what I'm asking about here. I don't. If you can describe from exactly why it would be out of order, was the possibility of you chairing the company raised before the change of government on September 7, or did you first hear of it after? If you want to keep it non-specific.
The possibility was raised.
Possibly was raised before.
Oh, in very general terms, absolutely. And it was made clear that it was one of several options.
Okay. What were the other options that were raised?
That's not an area I go into.
Yeah.
All right.
Continue on.
No, that's okay.
No.
I discovered what I wanted to discover. What did you have to do, if anything, and maybe you were completely unconnected from the process, but just describe for us the process of the appointment of Mr. or Professor Henry Ergus as a consultant as part of the review. Did you play any part in his appointment?
As best as I know, he's not a part of the review.
He will be conducting, or he's one of the parties conducting cost-benefit analysis of your various models.
That is a separate review.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the personnel that government intends to appoint to that review.
Are you proposing that there's a separation, that the government has responsibility? I'll put these questions to the department later. Did you play any part in Professor Ergus's appointment to that review?
Well, can I just pick up an earlier point?
Sure.
We have this strategic review underway. That is the focus, my focus and that of the board. There will be parallel reviews that the government has promised that I'm kind of generally aware of but not involved.
Okay.
And not being consulted upon, other than to be alert to whether the work that goes on in our review might serve as input into these other reviews in order to be efficient. So I expect that I'll be approached at some stage, but it hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet. All right, that's fair enough. And it's consistent with what's out there. So you had no prior engagement or knowledge of Professor Ergus's involvement in the cost-benefit analysis
Is
that's
he
running
involved?
in parallel?
Is he involved?
You're asking me. I think
Yeah.
we're meant to ask the question.
Chair, if there's a particular review or a particular process that
You've got four underway.
does not fall within the responsibility of NBN code,
Exactly,
then
Minister.
I think it should be posed somewhere else.
That's,
And
I'll put it to the
I
department
think the
later.
chairman, Senator Ludd, has answered it very well when he said, is there a review?
But it wasn't an answer, it was a question. If it's nothing to do with you, I'll let it go. I won't waste your time. If that's what you're saying, you have nothing to do with the process of the cost-benefit analysis that's being conducted in parallel to the review that you are right in the middle of.
Thus far, I've had nothing to do
Fine.
with it.
Okay, that's all. That's fine.
But that shouldn't be interpreted as saying that there might not be some crosstalk down the line.
I would kind of hope there would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you aware that Professor Ergis is the only one, to my knowledge, who actually has conducted a cost-benefit analysis into the NBN?
No, I'm not aware of
He
that.
did it on his own time, I understand, and his results showed that you shouldn't build it at all. It was a fascinating piece of work. So watch
Amazing, the
out
previous
for him.
government wouldn't have a cost-benefit analysis on the project.
Watch out
anyway.
for him. I think I'll leave it there, Chair, and I might come back a little later. if there's
Okay,
time.
thank you, Senator Ludlam. Just before going to Senator, I could ask one question. Mr. Wiskowski, I understand there's been discussions about a vision of the the NBN corporate plan that was never accepted by the previous or current government. Can you inform the committee how the strategic review is testing the relevantness and validity of all the assumptions around this project?
I can. The way this review is structured is that there are two substantial parts. One headed by Cordamentha, which is a forensic analysis of the costs of NBN code to date and expectations of a business as usual scenario and associated costs. And then there is another analysis which will be informed by BCG as to what the costs and execution issues are of an alternative technology path. And then BCG is commissioned to do a very complete analysis of the technical challenges of rollouts around Australia and identifying options that extend from fibre to the premises, fibre to the node, fixed wireless satellite, HFC and 4G wireless, and that will all then come together and be integrated by the third of the advisory firms, Deloitte's, and will then constitute the report that the board will present to the Minister. Now, having said all that, I've forgotten what the question was.
I think you've explained it pretty well. Senator Urquhart. Sorry, Senator Lundy.
Thanks very much. I just want to follow up some general questions about the rollout. Am I correct in saying that about 64,000 premises were passed by NBN fibre in brownfields areas in the 3 months to September?
What's the number? How many premises were passed in brownfields areas?
In the 3 months to
Oh, in
September.
the 3 months to September. My number is that 38?
Yeah, that's not
Okay.
Sorry, can you was that the cumulative number or?
No, I think it was additional, being 64,000.
From end of June to end of September, 3 months, how many additional houses did we pass?
That looks about right. Yeah.
How many?
I haven't got the, it's 163 to 227, so 60 something. 64,000, yes.
So that
looks about
that's
right.
correct. Okay. Am I also correct in saying that the Minister has said that the number that will be passed between now and next June will be double the number in progress? That's the Minister's statement. Okay. it's, I guess, a precursor to my next question. What I'm seeking to clarify is, does that mean an additional 450,000 premises will be passed by fibre by June 14, or, as he indicated to the Comms Alliance yesterday, will it be a total of 450,000 by next June?
Oh, that I can answer. Or did you want to jump in, Greg? Okay. The current forecast, which is still not settled, is that at the end of June next year, we will have passed approximately 450,000 homes.
Okay, right. So at June 2013, you'd passed about, about 450,000.
Well, at June this year was 163,000, and
But with build instruction issued?
we passed 163,000, right? So, and 450 is the preliminary number for 12 months hence.
For 12 months hence. So that's the
That's 290.
total of 450,000. Okay. So can I reconcile that with the Minister's press release of the 24th of September? And in that, the Minister said the revised estimate for premises passed by June 2014 was 720,000. So how many of those sites are brownfields, and how many are greenfields? Just trying to tally up what the difference is and compare that.
I mean, I can't unbundle the Minister's numbers. I just don't know the context.
Yes, well, can I ask Minister to take that on notice, because I'm very keen to unbundle the Minister's numbers so we can get some clarity about what projections he's putting into the public domain on behalf of NBN Co, given they don't know either.
Taken on notice.
Thank you. And how does that figure of 720,000, given that that's a figure the Minister has used, compared to the latest figures as of the 10th of November?
The latest homes passed figure of the 10th of November.
Yeah.
What have we got?
Premises past 242.
So we're at 242,000. In fact, it's now 245,000 as of November 18.
Yeah. So 720,000.
Sorry?
So I go back to my earlier question. The Minister has said the revised estimate for premises passed by 2014 was 720,000. How many are brownfields and how many are greenfields? I presume it is a composite number. Mr. Adcock.
Yeah, sorry, we need to get context, because if that includes greenfields, everything, I don't know the context of the 720,000.
No, neither do I. That's why I'm asking. So none of you know the context of 720,000.
We'll take that on notice.
I'll take it.
Yeah, okay. Am I right in saying the revision down of the NBN rollout advised in September was a consequence of the management of asbestos?
Well, again, the revision down from what to what?
I don't have the detail of that there. I understand there was a revision down in September in relation to asbestos, and I'm seeking confirmation of that.
Is that by post the election, or are we talking about the previous managements? Because I really can't speak. I just don't know.
Okay.
But post the election, there hasn't been. No, that's not wrong. Since I've been there, which is a little later, there has not been any formal revision down of the numbers, but the trend is in that direction. When we finally stabilise the numbers will be less than whatever has been in the public domain to date.
Okay. I'll probably place some questions on notice to get more clarity around that. Can I ask what those the changes to the forecast potentially mean for employment? My understanding is that the external workforce was due to grow from 7,500 in June 2013 to 15,000 in June 2014. And I note, Dr. Swikowski, in your opening statement, you paid particular attention to management of external contractors and partners in the build. So could you enlighten the committee as to your anticipated changes in employment opportunities?
And this, I think, is an area where Mr Adcock can add some value.
Thank you.
Not the only area, though.
No, not the only area.
Senator, my focus in the first week has been trying to get some stability back into the industry, and your point is valid. There have been a number of issues out there that have impacted the industry, asbestos being one of them. There are numerous. I've spent my first week talking to industry participants just to get their assertions and understanding of what's going on, and the next step forward is to try and get that sort of ramp back to where we can have some stability in the fibre to the premise rollout.
And so are they employing people? Are they laying people off? I've certainly seen media reports that contractors are laying off staff.
At this point in time, they're not employing people.
They're not employing people? Are they laying off people?
I understand that some of them have, yes.
And what are your objectives now in speaking to those contractors? Is to help them, encourage them to secure their workforce?
We need to get some stability out there in the pipeline so they can plan their workforces to both maintain some momentum going through this financial year and next, and being ready for whatever comes after that.
But we've established that the workforce required will grow between now and June next year. So I guess I'm trying to get an idea from you about...
We've established that it will grow?
Will grow, yes, because of the rollout.
At this point in time, we're just trying to get some stability so it can stabilise.
Right. Okay. So I guess the disconnect here is with the government's stated objective of having double the number of premises passed by effectively this time next year or June 2014. With the current workforce, it would be a reasonable assumption that that workforce would grow, would it not, to achieve the government's objective?
The workforce, there are, as I'm looking forward in my first week, there are contract instructions out there now that have underpinned the profile that we're looking at, and I understand in talking to our industry partners that they are working to get those sort of commitments met within their existing workforces. I think my current understanding, albeit preliminary, is that the layoffs have been affected have been due to the fact that they don't see the hockey stick as was previously sort of indicated.
Senator Lemon, just for clarification, the previous government had objectives, right, rolling out past premises. Has there been any announcement of your current team to set projects for next year? I believe there has not been. Is that correct?
No, it hasn't.
So I'm just querying, Senator Lundy, when you're asking about the projections and meeting numbers, am I correct in saying that the current NBN under new management, Minister Turnbull, have not set those targets, correct?
No.
So the only projections we have or targets were under the previous government.
Well, sorry, Senator, let me correct you. On the 24th of September, the Minister issued a press release that said the revised estimate for premises passed by June 2014 was 720,000. It's become clear through evidence that NBN Co aren't aware of the context of this number, so I'm actually using your Minister's material to base my questions on and to make some assumptions about the size of the workforce needed. Right. And they've taken those questions on notice.
Senator Lundy, as you must know, like the rest of us, the whole supply chain from design to activation is not working well. It just is not working well. And at various points with our construction partners, we've lost some partners, we are in dispute with others, but at the end of the day, we have to re-establish the relationships and find ways to work together where we can together drive productivity, permit our construction partners to make a reasonable return, and for us to have a smooth scaling up in the network. At the moment, our ability to forecast is poor. The trust the industry have in our numbers is not as good as it should be. The evenness of our delivering work to the industry is patchy. There's an enormous amount of work to be done, and anybody at the moment, and I note the Minister's forecast appears to have been made in September before some of us arrived. Any forecast made then and now is, in the famous words, inoperative, until we complete the review and lock in numbers that we know how to deliver and our partners subscribe to those numbers. We're not at that point.
Okay. I
Committee will adjourn for dinner and return at 7 o'clock for a further 50 minutes of NBN questions in. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's actually